created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
And welcome everybody. We are back on this season where we listen to nothing but ornaments and sopranos showing off. Together we are having, if you recall, if you heard our previous episode, we had that we would have Katia singing some Baroque, and this is what it's going to happen today. We know she is going to be singing us from the very well-known opera Giulio Cesare, a very interesting piece of music called Tutto, donna, vezzosa.
Ti guardo, tu
And of course, well, if you're familiar with this piece of music, then you know that's pretty much close to the ending, and we are facing. Where should we start? We are facing the very early stages of opera. Um, we have mentioned a couple of times in the past that the beginning of opera is not what we are familiar now. The tesituras were not the same, the size of the orchestration, the style, the content. Uh, there are so many things that are part. It looks like a past within the opera, even though most of the operas are actually compositions from the past. Some of them over 100 or 200 years. But the Baroque itself seems like to be a part of the past. I mean, you speak of the opera, but when you speak of the Baroque, your mind travels in time to something much earlier than Baroque, earlier than Beethoven, earlier than Donizetti, earlier than Rossini, and that is true. Those days are or were very different. So, Katia, why don't you start by telling us what captures or what makes you include the Baroque as part of your repertoire?
beyond the obvious,
Yeah.
because Baroque it's um, known exactly because for this excess of ornaments in any expression of the art. I think that I like the arguments that the first Baroque time started to take. We are here recovering stories from the Greek theater, and I found that pretty interesting. It's not the case, but there are a lot of myths, Greek myths, for example, in the stories. And I also like Baroque period because many of these operas were written a very long time before the theaters were built as we already know them. So it many of them were written more for a kind of camera music. It was more intimate, as you mentioned. The orchestration was smaller. The voices were smaller in some sense because they didn't need to sing over 20 trumpets. And it was not thought for hundreds of persons either. So these are some characteristics from Baroque music that I
Yeah, I think you mentioned a couple of things that are very interesting to keep in mind as we are going to progress in today's review of the Tutto, donna, vezzosa. But I wanted to add something. The opera has always been identified as having exaggerated plots, uh, incomprehensible stories, and that is even more for the Baroque. Because, and you already mentioned, many of the plots or the stories come from the Greek theater or to these mythological entities. So and they are in a way with a sort of human perspective, human behavior, and if we say that sometimes you can have repetitions, we have talked about the construction of A, B, and then the repetition of a given part in the cabaletta or the cavatina. Well, that is even more true in the beginning of the opera, in the beginning of this art, because the great librettos were written tens of years later. This was the beginning. Keep in mind that there was not, as in the case of Maestro Verdi, there was not Cesare Piave, who would be impaired with Maestro Verdi doing great compositions, or Boito, or any of the librettists that the maestros had. This was very, very early stage. This hasn't been perfectioned, at least in the way we know now. So we say, why is this? Why does this sound like there is not much attention to the text, and there's repetition, 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 and repetition, basically because of that. There were not poets at the service of the music composers working on putting everything together, that things could be in a way believable, that there was a perfect match of music and words, and many things that evolved later, and reasons why we know many other later compositions. We're getting things done, or they are getting things done, so excuses for the errors or the repetitions or the things that may sound weird, but it is what it is. That is how it started. And even though we're talking about, I believe Giulio Cesare has over 250 years that it was composed, which is a lot of years, it still sounds attractive. There is something that Handel put in here, and that still captures, which may lead me to my following question, which I don't think has been responded here in the past. We know from 2 years ago the special program that we had in February 2024, no, 25, February 2025. That's when we shared that you were working in Cleopatra, in the role that it is actually the one you're singing. Why don't you tell us, why don't you share us now, why is it that you chose Cleopatra? Or maybe Cleopatra chose you. How did it happen?
Uh, I would like to think that she chose me, but I don't feel that lucky, honestly. So I think that it is more logic to believe that I chose her. And I did because she is a very powerful woman. She is known for everybody for the great woman she was. She spoke many languages. She was very smart. She was totally charming, and everybody talks about her sensuality, but I think that it has to do more with the way she talked, the way probably she moved, uh, m- more than in a sexual or physical way. She didn't belong.
And that's because many people recall Julio Cesare, which is, of course, the Roman emperor. But not so many people understand what you just shared. For many people, it was just only sexual attraction to Cleopatra. But it was not only that. I mean, Cleopatra was not only, and I have read that probably Cleopatra was not as beautiful as we now think she was. But probably she was very attractive because of this uh, strong personality, this sort of uh, strong, intelligent, and in her way powerful woman. That's pretty much what some people think that's what captured the attention of the Roman emperor, and probably that is what is being depicted now. Cleopatra now is already, even though we know she's a character of history, she's already some sort of myth also because now whenever no matter when or where you say Cleopatra and everybody and Cleopatra and Egypt and the pyramids and there are many things that come to the mind of people. Many other women have passed through on the path of history, but very few have achieved such a place as Cleopatra. And with that being said, why don't you tell us, Katia, a little just before we start talking about this Tutto donna vezzosa, why don't you share with us what is the context? What is now Cleopatra doing just that motivates this singing?
Well, I think that we could call Cleopatra a master of chess. Yes, she probably was beautiful, but not as now we believed she was. But for capture somebody's attention, like Julio Cesar, is because she was more than clever. He could have the girl he wanted, and boy and guy. But to be um, captured by someone, it is because Cleopatra was very special. And in this point, that's what exactly, not about Julia Cesare, but she is already telling herself that she can do whatever she wants. And in some way, she did.
In many ways, she did. In many ways. Now, why don't we start uh, with reading the content? So before I read it, why don't you tell us a little of what do you think the state of mind is of Cleopatra when she says her first words in this Tutto può donna vezzosa? What do you think is going through her mind?
I think she's not trying to convincing herself. She already knows, and she's just rejoicing on that. So she is not um how would you say? She's not like talking seriously because she's not trying to believe this. She already knows that, so she's enjoying. She's looking at the mirror in some sense and just like, yes, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, this is some sort of affirmation of herself when she says "Tutto può donna vezzosa," which basically means I can do whatever I want. This sort of affirmation of "Tutto può donna vezzosa," tutto, tutto, tutto. Three times she says tutto, of course in different notes, but there is a persistence, there is a remark of I can do whatever I want, whatever I want, whatever I want, whatever I want. Tutto può una vezzosa, amorosa, scioglie il labbro o gira il guardo. This we have mentioned it when we talk about bel canto, and probably you would agree with this one. Um, Singing in perfect pitch and with perfect intention is not easy. We want to insist that many people say, "Oh, but it was extraordinary. It was a super high note." Yeah, but the previous part, the recitativo or the part cantabile, is horrible. She's completely lost in the mood, and this is a very modest. If you agree, 70-80% of the complete aria is very modest. There are not super demanding parts. She's not going for a fortissimo. It is not Manon Lescaut. It is not Tosca. It is not Turandot. It is not Leonora. It is not Macbeth. It's even though she's a woman of power, there is nothing in the opening of this part showing off of I am probably the most powerful woman in the world right now. And even
But
if
I think that, oh,
Mhm.
sorry. Probably because she's talking to herself. So if you are so secure of something like this, you don't have to gel. You don't have to gel it. You don't have to prove anybody that you are the most powerful woman. You are already.
And think of that because as you were mentioning it, I was thinking of Abigail in Nabucco when she's also in her area speaking to herself, but Abigail yells all the time.
Well, yes, definitely.
And she had no control at all of her emotions. And it is a different style, of course. Over 100 years passed, if I do the math well, yeah, around 100 years passed between the composition of one and the other. But the mood that is depicted here, it's you don't need to yell, and this is not the style of those years, but you don't need to yell when you are so sure of yourself. You know it. You're telling yourself, and while Abigail is yelling, the other woman is being very discreet. So, tutto può, donna vezzosa, tutto, donna vezzosa, because opposite to what happens centuries later, it is usually growing either in volume or in notes. Tutto, something like that, right? But this goes the opposite. Tutto può, donna vezzosa. You see, it's like even if not slowing, it's giving its time to each of the syllables so that the phrase is correctly achieved.
And there are also short notes. She doesn't have to explode. It's not necessary.
It looks more also like a natural way of speaking because she's not keeping anything for much longer than a natural speaking would require. You see, half a time, flows. She's not keeping the tutto, which would lose the naturality of the phrase. So pay attention to this because even though at the beginning we said that the Baroque is usually very exaggerated, more exaggerated than the opera later, Maestro Handel is not adding at the beginning any exaggeration at all. He's being very modest in the composition, very precise, very conservative. Nothing to display here. Of course, it is Baroque and it is a soprano, so eventually something is going to happen. Of course, of course. We go again for the three repetitions of the tutto, può una vezzosa, se amorosa, scioglie, labro e gira il guardo, s'amorosa, scioglie il labbro, scioglie il labbro, gira il guardo. Remember that we were saying that the texts are not usually very much developed and that there were even more repetitions than in the later case of the opera. So if you see the tutto is repeated along with the complete phrase of scioglie il labbro, gira il guardo. Repeated, even it's slightly different, but she has repeated basically the same. Now, since it's been repeated, and of course, Um, you're probably not going to be able because I cannot do it separately. Let me see if I can do that one here. Hmm. I would like you to notice this part, and I would surely leverage il guardo. Surely look at this and look at this. Even though the words are the same, it's clearly taken more time for her to repeat the same phrases. So even though there's been a repetition in words, it's not an exact repetition in the timing, which in a way, if you want to see it like that, the soprano is going to do it sort of slower. And it is a contradiction because if you are repeating but you are doing it slower, how do you make it? And that's the challenge for the soprano. How do you make it so that it doesn't sound too repetitive or even too boring?
Yes, it was a complicated period in that sense because I mean it's not that the argument was not important. Of course it was, but indeed many stories have a different ending from the original. And for example, this Moctezuma by Il Maestro Vivaldi, nothing to do with the history, because for Baroque the most important part was the excess.
Yeah, you could say so. Yeah.
No, if it sounded beautiful, that was enough, and nobody cared. I think that if you have watched Farinelli, this interesting film, I think that help me please with vestuario.
The
The
costumes.
costumes,
Hmm.
the costumes, the scenography. These things were the important, the pyrotechnics of the castrati. So if he's or she's saying the same phrase for 200 times, nobody was paying attention.
To be sincere, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Totally the opposite for El Virismo, for example. So in this case, it is the exposition of the area, so you just have to do what is written, and in the second part that everybody is waiting for, you can uh, put like 100 more notes, and the people is not gonna be interested if, of what you're saying and stuff like that.
Again, to be sincere, remember
Yes.
that we were speaking as the opera left the castles and those huge receptions with the monarchy and people of power. That's where this was originated. That's why Katia was explaining. All this was for those guys. But eventually, opera left those places, and but that's why Katia also mentioned there were not even theaters for the representation of these operas. There was no there was theater, but there were not operas. Everything came later, so the orchestras needed started to grow bigger, needed to be huge in order to cover a much bigger place, and that also demanded the voices to be much bigger. But remember that we have mentioned also that there is this, how can we say? Well, it is just, it is what it is. Huge, powerful voices are usually not good for ornamentation. And the opposite, small voices in volume, we're speaking, small voices are excellent for ornamentation. We have many times said, just think of Gena Dimitrova trying to sing Rosina. It's completely impossible. That was not the case. And on the other hand, because many people have also criticized Cecilia Bartoli, Cecilia Bartoli is a voice for ornaments because when you say, "Oh, that's because I attended her presentation in Italy and somehow was disappointed because I thought her voice was much more powerful," certainly it was not, because that's the way it is. Small voices work well with smaller orchestrations. Of course, the voice has to run and other things that we have mentioned, but it is what it is. Don't expect to be over the 20 trumpets and the 20 violins and everything as Katia was explaining. No, because that is not what is expected. But on the other hand, these small voices in volume are very good for building this environment where people see how the singer is building his way up to the ornamentation. It's going to be boring the message? Yes. Nobody's going to care? Yes. But the ornaments are coming.
Probably was the most perfect time to be a singer.
Well, it really depends because now, and we have seen it also recently, uh, people think that because a given singer has high, great notes and the ornamentation, and more the ornamentation, you have to agree. Most of the times, ornamentation in the past few decades is horrible to say the least. You cannot really distinguish the number of notes because if you say that this it is an ascending scale followed by a descending scale and then adding two more notes or transpolating to a D when it was a C or whatever the maestro wrote or a cadenza, if the singer barely hits four notes out of the 20, then you are lucky. Be- be- because uh, the ornamentation and the perfection of that emission is nothing that you can find easily now. And of course, for people who, in my case, like the Baroque and beautiful, very beautifully executed ornamentation, I will always say yes to a beautiful ornamentation. But when the singers are trying to do a thrill or whatever is it that they are trying to do, and they start with the wrong note, and as thing progresses, they hardly ever hit the note that they are supposed to be, and the voice sounds either too heavy or too flat with no beautiful harmonics. It's a disaster. To be sincere, it's a complete disaster. That's why there are not really there have not been many, but few, several great singers of the Baroque era. Few mezzos, very few sopranos, couple of countertenors, barely a baritone, but not more than that. Unless Katia, you tell me that we have dozens and that I was
No
living in
tenors.
another world. Not tenor. Remember that there weren't even tenors. The tenor voice really grew or is as we know now, not centuries but decades later. This period was not a period for the tenors, not at least as we know them to be now. They because remember as also Katia mentioned there were more the castrati and the castrati had ornamentation that no other tenor is able to produce. That simple. I know that many people may say at this moment, no, no, but Camarena can have ornamentation and Flores have, but that is not the kind of ornamentation that we are talking about. If you go back to the movie Farinelli, which made a huge effort in trying to put together how we think they sounded and what they could do, is miles away from what a tenor can do.
Yes, the color was completely different.
Color has nothing to do. The agility, the way they can hit and touch this pure sound, very pristine short notes, it's absolutely impossible for a tenor voice. It does not certainly mean that they were only better and as a result tenors now are worse than castrati. They were simply two different kinds of voices for doing very, very, very different things. And I still think that it would be very interesting that we could somehow travel into the past and see how that went, because it is also said that they also had an amazing fiato. So a fiato with perfect ornamentation, clear, bright sounds should have been amazing. But keep also in mind that this was a result of a very cruel act on them, and that's what their name comes from, because they should have their voice should have grown to male, so they had to interrupt that evolution of voice, which of course is very cruel if you see it now. But those are the centuries we are talking about. Okay, let's go. Why don't we go back to the lyrics now that we have talked a lot? So, scioglie il labbro, scioglie il labbro, scioglie il labbro, scioglie il labbro, oggi del guardo. Okay, so many times has she mentioned. Um, so unless Katia wants to sing for us this part, this first part, would you like to sing that one?
Yes, we are in bar 60, no, 58,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Tutto, tutto può donna vezzosa, amorosa, scioglie labbra, gira il guardo, scioglie labbra, gira il guardo.
And now that Katia gave us this present with this part uh, from Cleopatra, you know that Katia is a very cruel woman. You know that. You know moreover than me.
I'm about to say that it's easy.
So of course she's going to say that she's easy, but she was reviewing some performances of other singers, and I also usually do it. You know that we like, even if we know a piece, we like to review before, because it always refreshes you, gives you ideas, or makes you decide that you were deaf. This could be the case. Because I found a couple of them, and let me put it now, let me mark it on the screen now, because mm, this part, along with this part, makes most singers simply derail, because you have to be super smart, not only on the imposta, but also on the fiato. You ruin the balance or any of the two, and it is a disaster, as there are many videos on YouTube. But by the time the girl is here, and as you if you notice, it gives you the impression of ascending notes, but the higher note remains the same. The change is on the third note of each of these. Um, I forgot how to call this group of three, but this word of this group of three that I forgot how to call. The one that is ascending is the third note. That third note is which gives you the idea that it is growing. But not only here, in later cases of the opera, it is the same. When you have this note A following note B, which is the highest, and the note C, let's say here, in the next goes up a little, and the third time goes up a little, if you're not smart enough, usually the voice gets strangled. There are dozens of cases of recordings. You look that for yourself. By that time, you can see the poor singer suffering because the sound is here strong, like ah. It's it, it's again like a squirrel trying to escape from maybe from the alien, you know, that monster of the movie, like trying to get away, because she is not going to be able to make it, not only because she is ascending in the third note of the group, but because she's going to continue and now is going to descend. Remember that we have said many times the problems many uh, many times that do not come from the highest note, come from whatever comes before and what is going to happen after. That's where disaster comes. You have been playing here with the notes, sustain, play here with a very discrete number of notes, but then when you have to do this group of notes in a way showing, and I was saying, one has the impression that it is increasing in volume, but it is not. In in fact, if you want to increase the volume because you feel carried to that, you're going to duplicate the disaster. That's the only thing you're going
So please, you better shut
to
up.
achieve. And you know, for some reason, and I don't want to say the baritones, but it is true for the baritones mainly because the baritones like to sing. They love their voice so much that they like to sing loud all the time. If it is one F, they read triple F. If they read two Fs, they read four Fs. Because there is something that impels baritones to give all the volume. Tenors like to do that only when they can, which is not very often. Because if you're a tenor and you're thinking of, this is not exactly the same, but it is in a way similar to Vesti la Giuba. Vesti la Lluvia plays you a trick like that. That's why when the tenor reaches that part that people like, that's where the tenors suffer the most because they are coming from a similar exercise like the one we are seeing now. Maybe more horrible because in this case, since it is verismo, you are also singing with words. In here, it is only a sound, and it is an a, which is usually very easy to sing. But in recitar mentre presa del delirio, blah 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 blah, you are also singing, giving your syllables and words. But the the dynamism or the way it is evolving is the same. So that's why many people, and things got many people don't sing Vesti la Juba because that's the place where they fail. And because people are so trained to singing so much all the time louder, they give loud and they feel, oh, and the following is louder. By the third, by the moment they are going to reach a third, only they are going to crack the voice. And as I was saying, it's going to be a complete disaster. And maybe that would bring us a little a pause now that I mentioned other tesituras and other examples of the same case. Katia, you as a voice teacher, I am pretty sure you have cases of singers who believe that because it is opera, I have to yell all the time.
Yes, I had a baritone student indeed a few years ago, and that was something that we worked a lot. He had a beautiful baritone voice, but the problem for saying so, it was to control that powerful sound. And I told him several times, it's not about to hide your voice. You don't have to hide your voice, but you have to control it. You can't yell all the time. You have to sing inside of you, inside of your head. Try to sing inside of you. You will be heard outside anyway, but try to control that.
And with that being said, with the control, if you're studying this part, this is a nice exercise for all the tesituras, in this particular, of course, because it is for a soprano, but it is a good exercise. When you find this sort of exercises, try to control the volume. The volume is more worrying than the notes because the volume and probably being nervous is going to make you exhaust to run out of air in the worst time, in the worst part of it all. Because I also, let me see if I can use another color now. Let's use some blue because this transition here has to sound, well, I'm calling it a transition, but this change now has to sound very natural. If you reach after this exercise of what I was explaining, that the final note is ascending, and then you are going to start descending, if you just chop it like that, people are going to find that you were in trouble, and we don't want that. If you want that, go and check the YouTube videos to see how the sopranos fall in trouble.
Yes.
Just here, because also, Katia has explained in some other episodes, it's not so easy when you're singing and your imposta is here and you need to start descending. The inertia makes you feel comfortable in around the same range of the final note. It's like when you have to slow down the car and you cannot pull the brake like this and you you have to start diminishing, in that case, the velocity of the car, so that this descending sounds beautiful and natural. It doesn't sound like this woman is about to suffocate. That's why she finished the phrase. No,
Indeed, in all the versions that I studied, nobody, and I have to say that nobody sung the phrase uh, in one single breath. All of the sopranos I heard cut the phrase. So this is one of the kind of things that doesn't keep me humble.
well,
Sorry.
remember that soprano and humble are usually not together in the same phrase, so to nobody's surprise. But maybe maybe we should be considering making a, if not a season, or maybe yes, a season, or if not, at least a couple of episodes on the poor breathing technique that many versions, many performers have. Because everybody keeps saying, and everybody knows if you're studying singing, that breathing is very important. And you notice that singers are breathing 2 or 3 times when they are expected to do it only once when working through a phrase. And there are singers who seem to never breathe, like Caballé. She could sing maybe the complete the complete area with breathing only once, and the rest appeared to be like, "Hey, lady, you have to breathe. Please breathe a little, so that we can get you." And you have very natural breathing pauses, such as Tebaldi's. Sutherland's breathing is also very, very good. She was very smart in her breathing. But suddenly you see many other singers whose name we're not going to give now that seem to be falling in trouble often and often and often, and try to to hide it or to put it in the middle of somewhere so that it seems that they are not breathing. But if you pay attention, you say she is really breathing. Or sometimes the director himself is helping them also with the orchestra and with the tempo, or doing something so that they can breathe and that people don't realize they are breathing, which is also very contradictory, because you know, Katia, that when you have a good breathing technique, your voice is less stressed because it is flowing, it has the adequate amount of air, you feel comfortable, everything. But if you don't feel comfortable, you are taking, that breathing is usually very fast to keep the air, and it dries. Many people don't pay attention to that, but aspiring that amount of air in a millisecond dries the throat. And when you want to sing, you want to make sure that there is the right level of humidity in your voice, because if your throat is dry, the sound is going to show that the throat is dry. So that's why I wanted to mention that it is contradictory, that or everybody knows it is important to breathe, but many people don't really seem to be doing it the way they should be doing it. Could
And
you
it
like, yeah?
is
No,
It
no,
is
go ahead.
an art. It is an art to learn to use your air correctly because many times in this idea of singing using the air or singing through the air, you spread it but not use it wisely, and you start to teach to your body to do short phrases. The other case is try to content the air, not wasting it, and then you don't sing through air, so that's not gonna work either.
And I cannot think of the immense pressure because the air is your main tool. You don't have air, you are unable to sing anything. So imagine, let's say, let's pretend you are Carmen and you're trying to sing your first phrase. "The moment I was over, ta 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 ta." It's unnatural. You cannot do that. You should be able to work the complete phrase with one breathing. And you may say, Ricardo, you're exaggerating. Mezzos don't do that. Pay attention to the recordings. They are breathing well before it should be needed. And why should they need it when the opening of the habanera does not require lots of air? It's because they are not working properly the amount of air. Taran tan tan taran tan tan tarata tarararan tan tan. Because if you cut that phrase of the habanera, which is a very particular rhythm, as we have mentioned now, it cuts. Sometimes it falls apart. It's not working any longer. So orchestra help me, director help me, or I'm going to read very quickly so that people don't realize that I just pressed it. But it's not the case. But let's go back because we have mentioned that it is going to be repeated and repeated and repeated, and we are going back again to Scioglie il lauro, gira il guardo, scioglie il lauro, gira il guardo. And she's going to repeat it two more times, and finally, she's going to say something different. Now she's going to say, ogni colpo piega un dardo, ogni colpo piega un petto, sì, difetto non va quel cosca il dardo. Se difetto non va quel scocca il dardo. Nerone has a short intervention and then she goes back to Cleopatra, il portamento al volto donna vulgar non sembra, osserviamo in disparte la cagione del suo dolo. For the Mm, for the final part, and this is something that we need. Well, I exceeded. Sorry, in the Nirene and the Cleopatra, it was wrapping up here in the capo. Sorry, that I exceeded. Uh, what I wanted to mention is that remember that if there was excess in the bel canto, there is way more excess in the baroque. So even if it is written like that, the soprano or the prima donna or primo uomo or the castrato in that times will end up doing whatever he or she wants. Um, because we want to sound elegant, we call them variations when in fact it is the singer does whatever he or she wants. So with that in mind, Katia, how do you like to go about this final part? Do you like to add something? What is in your taste?
I think that in the very first part of the exposition, for my taste, it is to respect the main idea, to don't introduce variations, at least in the first two phrases, and then yes, to introduce variations, but I've heard some versions that you finally forgot what aria were you hearing. And for me, that's not the case. I mean, if it's completely another thing, well, write your own opera. So yes, you have to take the chance to show off because it was written with that purpose. But 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 not like that, please.
I mean, you mean use your right to show off, but keep it in a way under control, because it is also true. Uh, you can read about those days of the castrati that they would end up singing anything,
Yes.
completely unrelated to Handel or whatever it is that they were singing. They said, "I'm going to go for a trill. I'm going to add a cadenza. Then I will repeat and do many other things, add 20 more thrills or whatever. I am going to do it just because I can." That habit prevails somehow until the bel canto, even controlled, more controlled in the bel canto, and basically disappears in the verismo. That's in a way the evolution of how to keep in control a singer. No control in the baroque, little control in the bel canto, and fully controlled at least in the ornamentation. In that sense. Uh, what other advice would you like to give singers, Katia, in regards to preparing, studying, singing, doing some baroque stuff?
Well, if you are gonna add ornaments, make sure that you can handle that ornaments because sorry, but I heard a version and the soprano was showing herself off in the last cadenza and my God, she sounded like a bicycle with no brakes.
Yeah.
Really descending from a hill. Yes. So if she didn't feel secure about this, probably she could do something different. So now you have the freedom to choose what are you gonna do. Be honest with yourself and choose something that you really actually can do.
And probably your mother is not going to be the best judge for that, because your mom is going to tell you always, this was nice, my dear, as everything you sing, or your grandmother or your auntie. So you better find someone who is more sincere. Usually, your own teachers are usually very cruel, so probably they are the opposite sides. So there's got to be somewhere in between. But yeah, try to feel. What I think, and maybe you would agree, Katia, is that when you feel like singing and you are in front of the audience, whatever audience it is going to be, you have to enjoy. But if you say, I am going to be so ambitious that I'm going to go for a cadenza that I don't know if I am going to be able to make. Just imagine, you're putting yourself on the stage. You told the pianist or the orchestra that you are going to have your 60 seconds of glory at the end. That they basically stop while you do all the pyrotechnics, and they see you fall, as in the description of, as a bicycle with no brakes down the hill. Same poor woman. Instead of everybody enjoying, you're not enjoying. The orchestra is not enjoying, and if the audience is not educated, they may probably like it. But if there are educated ears, they are going to say, like, "My God, yeah, why you should have not done that. I don't want to remember this piece because of what you just did, because it's basically more that you can actually handle."
Yes, probably they will be thinking, oh my God, please, no, this is just the second area.
You should
What
have
comes next?
you should have stopped in the first part and forgotten completely the second. So probably don't make that to yourselves. If this is not the time, we have mentioned it earlier in other episodes. If this is not the time, it is not the time to try it. If if your voice is not so big and you are more of a soprano leggero, probably that is your case, it does not mean that you are good for Baroque. Not because you are not Violetta Valery makes you perfect for Baroque. Baroque has its own demands. As we explaining at the beginning, it requires perfect ornamentation, perfect quality of the sounds. if you're struggling with the quality of the sounds, basically Baroque is not your thing. You should try looking for something else.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe we have not mentioned it earlier, but maybe we should now. Kathy, if you agree, of course, when you start singing, everybody wants to see himself as being able to sing the greatest roles of his tessitura. Of course, it's natural to be ambitious.
Yes.
But if at some point in your road you find it too difficult, it's fair if you go for other genders. If you're not that great, go for the musicals. Musicals, it's a less demanding gender. Go for it. There are many beautiful pieces also there. But don't put yourself in a situation where your resources, your own resources, even your concentration, if you're a naturally distracted person, it is very unlikely that you're going to make a great thing in opera singing because opera singing requires extreme concentration. We have not mentioned it in the past, but it is true. You need an extraordinary concentration. Even when you are suffering, you are suffering on stage in a but your mind is still focused.
Yes.
If your mind is not focused, if you're unable to handle all that you have to handle, go for something easier. I was just reading a post. It was not a singer. It was what did he play? The cello? I don't recall what his instrument was, but he was mentioning that he had left music because he suffered a lot. He enjoyed studying, correcting his mistakes, but when he was going to be performing, he suffered so much that the love he had for the instrument just left him. And that if that is the case, I would really suggest that you can try. There are other genders that you could really try, but don't push yourself into something that you're not. It is also maybe Katia, we should be very sincere. Even if you have the right voice for the Baroque, but maybe you don't feel it. Maybe you really don't like it. And if you don't feel it and you don't like it, don't sing it. It's simple. Like you have a heavy, powerful voice, but you don't like verismo because it's too much drama. Don't sing verismo. Don't push yourself into those extreme emotions that you don't like to be enduring. So probably the formula is doing what your voice is best at and that you really enjoy doing.
Yes.
Any final thoughts on Cleopatra and Julio Cesare, Katia?
Well, yes, about them, but about ourselves as singers. Be true to yourselves, be honest to yourselves. It's very brave to record yourself and see your record and hear your record and pay attention to what are your fortitudes and your weakness and choose what is best for you.
Yeah, and that I was also thinking that probably that could require another episode, Katia, because recording can be tricky. Remember that we, even spoken or sung voice, we do not the sound that we hear is not the sound that we are going to find in the recording. And 95% of people, when we listen to our recorded voice, say, "This is the most horrible thing that I have." Is that really me? I remember many years ago when I heard my voice recorded in a meeting. When I heard my voice in that recorded meeting, I said, "Is it true that these guys had to listen to this horrible voice for over 40 minutes? How could they resist? This voice is horrible. This spoken voice is horrible because we are not used to listen to our spoken voice, and people say, your voice is not that horrible. It sounds okay." But certainly not the voice you listen to yourself throughout your ears naturally. The recorded voice may sound way, way different. But as I was saying, maybe we should build an episode on that because we also need to consider that once you pass the horror of listening to yourself for the first time, there is usually the advice of somebody with more experience or with a different point of view, which is always interesting. But the only person who really knows what was going on in that precise moment is yourself. You may have a teacher who knows your voice very well, but it is impossible that he or she lives inside of you to understand. No, 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 that was not the problem. The problem is that I did this, which led to the disaster. And the teacher thinks that the disaster was coming from somewhere else. But well, let's do that. And would you like to sing something else, Katia, as we are wrapping up?
I don't know if I can sing the entire exposition with the variations.
Yeah, let's do that.
Tutto, donna, vezzosa, tutto, donna, vezzosa, saborosa, scioglie il labbro, gira il guardo, tutto, tutto può, vezzosa, sa, scioglie il labbro, guardo, saborosa, scioglie il labbro, guardo. Tutto può donna vezzosa, saborosa, scioglie il labbro, gira il guardo, scioglie il labbro, gira il guardo. Gira il guardo, scioglie il labbro, gira il guardo.
You can follow our channel for the latest updates and more content. Opera We Love Singing, in just one word. Link in the description of the episode.